Hello and welcome everybody to the Long 19th Century group. And our speaker tonight is Michael, and he's going to be talking about the real St. Silas's. But I want to mention next week also, before we get started. And next week, for those who are not in the UK, we have a time change. So you might want to refer to the schedule for Eastern time, that's Lorraine, 3 p.m. for where I am in California, noontime. Sorry, let me stop that. For Moscow and Turkey, that's 10 p.m. And for India, it goes till half hour after midnight, half past midnight. So Albin, you want to tell us a little bit about your talk for next time?
I'll be very brief. Next week's talk's about Bloomsbury, which is pushing the boundaries of this group, I know, tremendously, because it's that great 20th century phenomenon in art, literature, and thought. But my excuse is, well, first of all, because I've just spent 2 weeks ago, I was in Sussex on a Bloomsbury holiday, or leading a Bloomsbury holiday. So it fitted in with that. But I can justify it on here on the grounds that its roots were very much in the Victorian age, and it was a reaction to it. And it's also a very interesting subject. So I'll try and make it as Victorian as possible for at least the first 5 minutes. So I look forward to next week.
Thank you very much. All right, if I could ask everyone in the room to mute their microphones except Michael, and if I could ask Michael to bring up your slides.
Twice, yes, I've got the right one here. Is that working?
I don't know yet. Yes, it is working perfectly. So thank you, everyone. Good. And Michael, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. Well, let me first begin by something slightly lighthearted, as I thank and welcome all of you here. Those of you who want to see Thomas Combe rather than me, I thought that might be helpful. A very sincere thank you to all of you for finding time to listen to this lecture tonight. I'm just going to put the light a bit closer to me. And to those friends who are joining, especially the first time, I appreciate this very much. I just want to single a few out, some who may not be here, but said they might be here. So if they aren't here, then their ghostly thanks to those who aren't here among those I've seconded out here. I'm not sure who's here for St. Barnabas's. I see Maggie's here. And I think Tom, our organist and choir master, might join us a little later, and Matthew, the deacon and fellow of Worcester. But my actual parish priest is here. Jeremy, the rector of Woodstock, former provost of Dundee Cathedral, very warm welcome to you and to all from Woodstock Parish Church as well. And also among others clergy here, I wanted to particularly welcome a very dear long-standing friend, David Mayhew, formerly the vicar of Holy Trinity Commentary. I think we may be joined tonight by Jessica, the librarian of Pusey House, who kindly photographed the title pages of the sermons of Father Noel. And fourthly, my brother-in-law is certainly here, Bill. Welcome to you and his cousin Anne. Lastly, by no means least, though I'm not sure one of them is currently here at the moment, someone who was going to join us for Family Connections, who may be joining us at some point, is Carol, who is several times the great niece of Thomas and Martha Combe, who very kindly sent me photocopies from the family Bible and a photograph of Martha, which I shall be using tonight. Finally, one person who's definitely here is Hattie from St. Andrew's Church, who is several times the great niece of Florence, the second wife of Thomas Hardy. Without much further ado, thank you very much, everyone who is here tonight. Thomas Hardy, let me move on from me. Wait a minute, that's gone wrong. Yes. Oh, yes, I was going to show that photograph of St. Barnabas taken by Henry Taunt in 1875. So you can see it. Thomas Hardy was assistant architect to Arthur Blomfield from 1862 to 1867, who was shortly afterwards chosen by Thomas Combe as the architect for St. Barnabas's Church in Oxford. He wrote about the church 30 years later. In Jude the Obscure, St. Barnabas's became St. Silas's. The Church of Ceremonies. Oxford was itself Hardy's Christminster, and the suburb of Jericho, Beersheba. Jude's cousin and common-law wife, Sue, frequented the place on their return to Christminster. And I'm not going to attempt to do the accent, so I'll just do it as it comes. Maybe Alban would be better. Alban would be a lot better than this, and Tracy. There is a strange, indescribable perfume or atmosphere about you tonight, Sue, he said. It is incense. Incense? I've been to the service at St. Silas's, and I was in the fumes of it. Oh, St. Silas's. Yes, I go there sometimes. Indeed, you go there. One night he came to St. Silas's looking for her. Jude entered the church. The prevalent silence seemed to contain a faint sound, explicable as a breathing or a sobbing, which came from the other end of the building. High overhead, above the chancel steps, Jude could discern a huge, solidly constructed Latin cross, as large, probably, as the original it was designed to commemorate. It seemed to be suspended in the air by invisible wires. It was set with large jewels, which faintly glimmered in some weak ray caught from outside as the cross swayed to and fro in a silent and scarcely perceptible motion. Later authors whose books referred to the church included Evelyn Waugh, P.D. James, Joanna Trollope, and A.N. Wilson. Colin Dexter, in the first Inspector Morse novel, The Dead of Jericho, wrote of the looming ominous bulk of St. Barnabas's Great Tower. In his poem entitled St. Barnabas, Oxford, John Betjeman referred to its polygrammatical lacing of bricks amidst the reddened remorselessness of Cardigan Street. Good Lord, as the Angelus floats down the road, Byzantine St. Barnabas, be thine abode. The foundation, section 1, that was the introduction, the consecration. The foundation stone of St. Barnabas's was laid on the 24th of April, 1868. Jackson's Oxford Journal reflected, not many years ago, the meadows in this direction, which were flooded in winter, were known as Ward's Woods. The site of the church was on the land owned by George Wood. On the Tuesday, the 19th of October, 1869, the feast day of Oxford's patron saints and friars wide, Bishop Samuel Wilberforce consecrated St. Barnabas's Church. The Illustrated London News referred to the grand ritualistic procession from St. Paul's Church, Walton Street, in which the bishops of Nassau and Minnesota took part. Jackson's journal for the 23rd of October, 1869, contained a full report, recording that every part of the sacred edifice was crowded with a highly respectable congregation, including a large number of junior members of the university. The sexes were separated, the females occupying the northern and the males the southern side of the church. The procession down Cardigan Street had indeed been a very imposing character. It was headed by the two church wardens, Messrs. Hutt and Cowderoy, and the Bishop of Oxford, preceded by his pastoral staff and the Archdeacon of Oxford. A large cross and several banners were borne aloft in the air. The procession, numbering 100 people, consisted of the choirs of St. Paul's and St. Barnabas's, the clergy who had foregathered at St. Paul's, and some members of the university. They sang the processional hymn, "Onward, Christian Soldiers," until reaching the church door. At that point, the bishop was received in the usual way, a petition presented, praying his lordship to consecrate the church. The prayers were said by the new incumbent, Montague Henry Noel, followed by the curate of St. Paul's, the Reverend W. Yates. The first lesson was read by Canon James Ridgway, the principal of Culham College, and the second by Adolphus Hackman, brother of the Vicar of St. Paul's. Bishop Wilberforce preached on the text of Acts 18, verse 10. "For I am with thee, and no man shall set on thee to hurt thee, for I have much people in this city." His exposition of the text was followed by a forcible allusion to the Christian liberality of the founder of the church, and it concluded by requesting the alms of the congregation, ALMS alms, which would be devoted to the organ fund. The article contained the full text of the sentence of consecration, which was then read by the registrar J.M. Davenport. Wilberforce insisted on facing north, taking the position prescribed by the rubric of the Book of Common Prayer, while the bishops of Nassau and Minnesota took the eastward position. The bishop would have found the northward position very difficult during the prayer of consecration. He was described as a phantom celebrant, as he was obscured by the baldacchino, which is also narrow at both ends and was, of course, built for the celebration of the Mass ad Orientem. Wilberforce recalled in his diary, "Disagreeable service, acolyte running about, paste squares for bread, etc. But the church is a great gift." George W. Russell recalled the comments of someone who attended the consecration service. "The opening of St. Barnabas may be regarded as epoch-making in the history of the Anglo-Catholic movement. The fine and dignified character of the founder, the preparatory work done by Mr. Hackman, the Vicar of St. Paul's, Oxford, from which parish the district assigned to St. Barnabas was taken, and the novel character of the Italian basilica style of architecture, all seem to be open the way for a new departure. And when to those was added the strong personality of the first vicar, by Mr. Noel, the first vicar, and the diverse gifts of his two curates, it was clear that something was bound to come of the new foundation, and so it turned out. I want to just also thank, by the way, Father Christopher, the current vicar, for permission to photograph. I'm going to let me just break for one moment to mention this. There's an extraordinary. There's a photograph album that belonged to the first vicar, Montague Henry Noel, which is an incredible resource of material for Anglo-Catholics history and also, of course, the travels, including Russia. done in the late 19th century. It was a gift to him on the 25th anniversary of his incumbency at St. Barnabas. And some of these are photographs from that album. I should have mentioned this at the beginning. The new vicar was appointed by the church's patron, Thomas Combe, who had himself seen the need for St. Barnabas's and financed the church's consecration. Given the composition of this group, I should preface my presentation on the early history of the Oxford, most ritualistic church, by some explanatory remarks about both the Oxford movement and ritualism, and I apologize to those who know all of this already, as some of you no doubt do. John Henry Newman wrote in his autobiographical Apologia Pro Vita Sua of 1864, on the 14th of July, 1833, Mr. Keble preached the assize sermon in the university pulpit. It was published under the title of The National Apostasy. I have ever considered and kept the day as the start of the religious movement of 1833. John Keble was professor of poetry at Oxford from 1831 to 1841. His book of devotional poems, The Christian Year, became a bestseller. He was a deeply spiritual man who humbly lived out his last 30 years as a parish priest and spiritual director in Hampshire. Newman himself had undergone a kind of evangelical conversion in his youth, but came under Keble's influence after he joined the senior common room at Oriel. There he also met Edward Bouverie Pusey, who had been to Germany and had been drawn to their school of early biblical criticism. Pusey himself would later become a canon of Christ Church and professor of Hebrew. He promoted the formation of Anglican religious communities of celibate priests and nuns. Puseyism was a term used later by those who wanted to vilify the Oxford movement. Its other name was Tractarianism, because from 1833 to 1841, the group that was led by these three published 90 tracts for the Times, most of them anonymously. They covered a wide range of subjects, from ecclesiology to spirituality, from patristics to the sacraments. They emphasized the visible church. The essential message of the Tractarians was that the Church of England was truly Catholic in its via media, middle way between Rome and Protestantism. Newman coined the word Anglican. Anglicanism was indeed Catholic and most loyal to the Church of the Fathers. The apostolic succession they maintained involved the handing down of authority to the bishops of the Church of England and the bestowing of a true priesthood on her clergy through the laying on of hands. The sacraments of the Church were real channels of divine grace and central to its ministry. The Catholic faith involved a spiritual life of prayer and private devotion under spiritual direction. The Book of Common Prayer and its rubrics should be used in a truly Catholic sense. In the final tract, tract 90, Newman argued that even the 39 articles could be interpreted in a Catholic rather than a solely Protestant sense. This was more than the University of Oxford could tolerate. Soon afterwards, Newman left his parish and started a small community at Littlemore before entering the Roman Catholic Church in October 1845. Others followed. Archdeacon Manning succeeded, and both he and Newman were later to become cardinals. All but one of the sons of William Wilberforce, the slave emancipator, went over to Rome, the exception being Samuel, later Bishop of Oxford and Winchester. Not long after Newman's secession, religious communities began in the Church of England among men and women, and Pusey took an active part in fostering them. The so-called second generation pushed out the liturgical limits of the Tractarians, who had not been overly concerned with ritual and externals. Ritualism soon developed and found its first manual in the Directorium Anglicanum by John Purchas, published in 1858. Some ritualists became more Roman than Rome itself, adopting an eastward position faced by priests, deacons and subdeacons wearing mass vestments, who also absolved penitents in confessionals. Their altars were richly attired and blazed with candles. Their processions were led by incense swung by thurifers, and more candles carried by acolytes around a processional crucifix. Disraeli's Public Worship Act, or Regulation Act of 1874, was intended to put down ritualism as the mass in masquerade, and under its operation, 4 priests were soon imprisoned and became seen as martyrs. This discredited the act, and it failed in its intention. However, it remained on the statute book until it was repealed on the 1st of March, 1965. According to the family Bible, Thomas Combe was born on the 21st of July. Thomas Combe, Martha Combe, section 3. According to the family Bible, Thomas Combe was born on the 21st of July, 1796 in Leicester. He was the second son of 7 children and the eldest son of Thomas and Theodosia Combe. The elder Thomas Combe was a printer and the leading radical bookseller in Leicester. Thomas and his younger brother Harvey entered Repton School in August 1808. After leaving school, he joined his father's bookselling and printing business in Leicester. The younger Thomas first moved to Oxford around 1824 to assist Joseph Parker in his new bookshop in Tell Street. Without any prospect of partnership with Parker, Combe moved briefly to London in 1826 and then returned to Leicester to share his father's business in Gallowtree Gate as a bookseller. After his father's death, Combe moved to Oxford. Oxford University Press was divided into 2 sides under different managers, the learned classical side and the Bible side. Combe was appointed by the delegates as superintendent of the learned side on the 24th of June, 1836, with a salary of £450. It was stipulated in his contract that he should reside in a house provided by the board, with an annual rent of £50. That's the house in the quadrangle of OUP. He was allocated to University Press, was the address, or North House, one of a pair of semi-detached managers' houses in the OUP quadrangle, where he lived for the rest of his life, and his widow resided there until her death in 1893. John Henry Newman introduced him to Martha Howell Bennett Edwards and married them at St. Ebb's Church on the 3rd of September, 1840. She had been born in Hereford around 1806 and baptized at All Saints Church on the 21st of September, 1809. Martha was the eldest daughter of John Edwards. The family moved 1777 to 1850. The family moved to Oxford in 1819. John established a furnishing ironmongery in the High Street, from which he had retired by the time of the 1841 census. Thomas Combe succeeded the very able Samuel Collingwood as printer to the university in 1841. He was also appointed a partner in the Bible press. Combe purchased sufficient shares become a senior partner in 1871. He relinquished his superintendence of the learned side, and under his management, the Bible press expanded. The university showed its gratitude by conferring on him an honorary MA in March 1859. He had himself become not only a very successful man of business, but also one of considerable means. He and his wife became major patrons of the Pre-Raphaelites, especially of John Everett Millay and William Holman Hunt. They were a childless couple, and Hunt became almost a son to them and had a room in their house. Holman Hunt recalled, "There was a mill then out of use at Wolvercote, and we, Combe and himself, wended our way there not infrequently in the character of searchers after the picturesque. Combe bought the almost derelict Wolvercote paper mill, of which the Dukes of Marlborough had been landlords since around 1720. The conveyance was dated the 14th of August, 1855. The old mill had supplied handmade paper to OUP since the late 17th century. He pulled it down and rebuilt it and equipped it. The old manual methods of production were now replaced by machinery. He introduced the division of labor along a system akin to an assembly line, which maximized output. The enterprise augmented his personal wealth considerably. His appearance gained him the nickname of Patriarch to the young Pre-Raphaelites and later the Jerichoites. One of his reading boys recalled him as a very fine-looking man with long white hair and beard, piercing dark eyes, and a striking face and head, which, it was remarked after his death, bore a striking resemblance to those given by Michelangelo to the patriarch Moses. He was indeed a paterfamilias to the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, to his employees, and to the poor of Jericho. I'm not sure whether this man who I'm about to show you is actually here, and apologies if he doesn't like the picture. The archivist of OUP, Dr. Martin Moore, has written, "In all but name, Combe was squire of Jericho." With the collaboration of another like-minded partner, Edward Pickard Hall, he sought to educate and entertain the employees. They augmented a drum and fife band for the boys and a brass band for the men. These led the Sun. This is, of course, a much later, 1905, I think, this postcard. These led to the Sunday processions to St. Paul's Church. Combe started a night school in 1853. With such an interesting scheme of instruction over 5 evenings a week that one old boy described it as an extraordinary test of endurance. However, fondly remembered outings and boat trips were also organized for their recreation. Combe and Hall also ran a Sunday school, and Combe set up the University Press Savings Bank. Thomas Combe's relationship with the leading Tractarians predated the Oxford movement itself. His unmarried sister, with whom he had resided when he first moved to Oxford, took lodgers, and they included John Henry Newman, Edward Pusey, and Harold Froude. He listened to Newman's sermons at the University Church. Correspondence between the two men continued long after Newman became a Roman Catholic. Combe, I've found this in the diaries, Newman's diaries, Combe ordered a set of the Tracts of the Times in December 1830 3. St. Paul's Church in Walton Street was built partly for the employees of Oxford University Press. The new parish, was carved out of those of St. Thomas and St. Giles. The second vicar, Canon Alfred Hackman, was a strong supporter of the Tractarians, who became actively involved there and was a church warden. Christopher Hibbert has rightly described the 19th century Jericho as a citadel of the Oxford movement. St. Paul's proportions were described in a volume, History, Gazetteer and Directory of the County of Oxford, published in 1852, my copy here. It is 80 feet long and 39 feet broad. Its style was Ionic, and it was Oxford's only Parisian church. Jericho. Jericho takes its name from the Jericho Gardens, which lay to the west of the Radcliffe Infirmary. I couldn't find any picture of it, unfortunately, after the hospital opened in 1870. Gardens themselves date back to the 17th century and are mentioned in Anthony Wood in 1688. Jericho House was already on Walton Street as an inn, erected circa 1850. The area itself remained virtually unpopulated until the end of the 18th century. The Oxford Navigation Society's 91-mile-long canal reached Oxford in 1790 and thereby defined the western boundary of the new suburb of Jericho, which stretched eastwards to Walton Street. In 1825, the Jericho Iron and Brass Foundry was founded by William Carter and built at Jericho's northern extremity in Walton Well Road. It was to become Lucy's Eagle Ironworks. The Oxford University Press then moved to Walton Street in 1830. Many small businesses soon opened in the area. Jericho was Oxford's first suburb, and it rapidly expanded, bounded to the north by St. Sepulchre's Cemetery. In 1833, Jericho's population was nearly 1,600. Housing was erected to minimal standards quickly and cheaply. Sanitary and sewerage conditions were clearly deficient. There were major outbreaks of cholera in 1832, 1848, and 1854. In 1848, Dr. W.B. Ormond's survey on the sanitary condition of Oxford marked out Jericho as a center of disease. Robert Sire, I think that's how you pronounce him, Robert Sire Hogarth, an engineer and cartographer based in Oxford, produced a map of the city in 1850, specifically for sanitary purposes. It showed that Jericho had already reached almost to its current size, built in a paralleled grid pattern, stretching down from Walton Street towards the canal. It looked much the same, but clear in Cassell's weekly dispatch atlas of 1860. Drainage improvement enabled further development in 1849, which was completed by the time of the first Ordnance Survey map of 1876. Owing to the rapid expansion of Jericho towards the canal, the accommodation available in St. Paul's became clearly insufficient, and extra services were provided at St. Sepulchre's Cemetery Chapel for OUP employees. In 1830, the new parish of St. Paul's had a population of 1,600, but by the late 1860s it had risen to 4,000. However, the church would only accommodate 630. The Combe saw the need to provide a new church in an area chiefly of the poorer classes, which would also advance the Catholic movement in the Church of England. In 18th, slightly wrong, yes, okay. I got those two in the wrong order, so anyway, excuse me for that. Section 5, the church and its architecture. In 1839, Thomas Combe had become secretary of the Oxford Society for the study of Gothic architecture, and in 1864, he had paid for the building of the Radcliffe Infirmary Chapel in a Gothic style by Arthur Blomfield, 1829 to 1899, which has been described as being in the style of 1300. He re-employed the same architect for St. Barnabas's. Blomfield wrote to Combe that he had chosen to revert to the earliest arrangement of Christian churches, namely that of the basilica, in its broad features. Thus, he concurred with Combe's own strong desire to adopt the basilica model. In the same published letter to Combe, Blomfield acknowledged that Combe had left him unfettered, apart from distinct and sensible instructions. He was given almost a free hand, but told that it should be large enough for 1,000 worshippers, sound in construction, and the interior dignified. Nothing was to be wasted on external appearances. The published version included a ground plan. Its Italianate Romanesque style in the form of a basilica showed marked similarities to some famous Italian churches, but contrasted sharply with the prevalent Gothic style, which was favored by other contemporary churches in Oxford. Blomfield wrote to Combe, "I need not here enter into the description of the early basilica, as most lovers of church architecture are perfectly familiar with the simplicity and beauty of its arrangement. Those who are not can refer to Gailey Knight's plan of San Clemente in Rome." The architect, the journal of the architect, published an article on the new church on the 13th of August, 1870, which described the exterior succinctly and functionally. The material at first thought of by the architect, Mr. Arthur W. Blomfield, for the entire construction of this church was concrete, but it was found that the main walls could be built much more cheaply of ordinary rubble work in blue lias mortar, cemented without to protect it from the weather, and plaster within to receive the decorations. Portland cement, however, was employed for steps and windowsills, and in all positions where stone would ordinarily be found, except on the columns and capitals, where Bath stone is used. I'm still quoting. It needs scarcely be added that no molding or other feature in imitation of wrought stonework has been admitted into the concrete work. The Oxford Times described the exterior as having no pretensions to architectural beauty, being built of brick and concrete without the least attempt at ornament, Internally, it is of noble dimensions, lofty and well proportioned. It kept the identity of the donor anonymous, referring to the church as the munificent gift of a gentleman residing in St. Paul's. For the decoration of the interior, Combe confided to Holman Hunt that he had rejected the use of mosaic, which was nevertheless used in a richly decorated apse. This was clearly in a Byzantine style. Its semi-dome is a richly gold pantocrator set against the dark blue sky filled with golden stars. Below the figure of Christ is a frieze of the apostles. John Julius Norwich described it as an east end that glistens with gold leaf. Thomas Combe was very pleased with the result, as he wrote to William Holman Hunt, "I wish you could see it. It is a basilica. After the Cathedral of Torcello, near Venice, it is the perfect basilica in this country, and bids fair to do Blomfield, the architect, much credit." A campanile based on that of Torcello Cathedral was added in 1872 at the cost of £789, bringing the overall cost of the building to £6,492. Originally a separate structure, it was joined to the church in 1887 and re-roofed in 1892. The four-faced clock was installed in 1890 to encourage punctuality among the employees of the OUP. Blomfield also added a lady chapel to the east end of the northern aisle in 1888 to 9. Section 6, and the penultimate section, for those of you who are weary, is a very short to this. The first vicar was chosen as the vicariate or incumbency of Montague Henry Noel. The first vicar was chosen by Combe. He was Father Montague Henry Noel, 1840 to 1929, who served as parish priest for 30 years. His appointment as vicar was announced in the press in March 1870. Noel laid the foundations for much that has epitomized the life of the parish ever since. Montague Henry Noel was the second son of the Honourable and Reverend Francis James Noel, 1793 to 1854, who was the fifth son of Sir Gerald Noel, second Baronet, Edwards MP, and who it was listed in the he was listed in the clergy list of 1841 as Vicar of Teston and Nettlestead near Maidstone, Kent. Montague Henry was born at Teston Rectory on the 18th of December 1840 and went to Eton and is listed there at the time of the 1851 census as having been born in Teston, Kent. He was confirmed by Bishop Wilberforce. He came up to Christ Church from Eton, matriculating on the 29th of June, 1859. Noel became acquainted with Oxford's leading Anglo-Catholic clergy. The Gospeller recalled over 30 years later that Noel, you'll see some photographs of him in a moment, was not infrequently at the choral celebrations of Merton College Chapel, where good churchmen were wont to gather. The services were well rendered, considered advanced. Noel was a member of the Brotherhood of the Holy Trinity, which was founded by Dr. Pusey. Noel's BA was conferred on the 10th of December 1863 and his MA on the 31st of June 1866. Samuel Noel Wilberforce ordained Noel in the parish church of Lavington in Sussex on Sunday, that's his own church, Sunday the 24th of September 1865. He served his first curacy very briefly at St Mary's Caldecote in Monmouthshire, on the shores of the Bristol Channel. Edward Turberville Williams was the vicar from 1841 to 1885 and had overseen the restoration of the church in 1851 with 450 sittings. He had been largely responsible for the founding of the church school in 1847. Noel worked among the poor with the vicar. Excellent. His second curacy was at the Church of St. Peter's and Paul in Wantage, under the tutelage of its renowned vicar, Canon William Butler, from 1865 to 1869. Father Noel was later to become a member of the Anglo-Catholic Society of the Holy Cross in 1871. I should point out that Wantage was a huge influence on Noel, and Canon Butler certainly was. Charges of Roman Catholic behavior were made from the outset. A certain E. Matthews wrote a long letter to the Church Times on the 17th of August, 1870, entitled Bowing to the Cross at St. Barnabas Church. He had attended an 8 o'clock service on the previous Saturday. The minister, the reader of the scriptures, and the choir evidently regarded the acts of turning to the east, bowing to the cross, and crossing themselves as a part of their worship. He went on to show how these had taken place. After the service, an exchange of questions and answers occurred outside between visitors and choristers. One visitor was curious as to why they bowed to the cross, to which the chorister replied, "We are told to do so. It is our religion." The visitor remarked that the cross was simply made by a carpenter, and that it was wrong to bow to it, and the Bible gave no such command. After further discussion, a chorister assured another visitor, "No, we are Catholics, but not Roman Catholics." Mr. Matthews concluded, "I will add that there are many who, for the sake of the young, for the sake of the purity of their religion and the liberties of England, are praying earnestly that Mr. Noel and all his ritualists may abandon that system. Those who did not kneel at St. Barnabas have faith that Mr. Noel may become as zealous and earnest in teaching evangelical religion as he is now in promoting ritualism." Shortly after the church's Diamond Jubilee, the vicar received a letter from a certain Mrs. Blanche Child, née Puckle, who had been confirmed at St. Barnabas in April 1870. This is written in 1929. "I still have a very vivid recollection of the beautiful service and your lovely church, which for varying reasons I have been unable to attend since. After the confirmation service, the first I believe to be held in your church, the carriage horses took fright and rushed off, the tragedy being narrowly averted by the gallant action of the clergy, who were instrumental in stopping it. Thomas Combe died suddenly on Tuesday, the 29th of October, 1872, and his death was attributed to angina. Angina is now regarded as a symptom, and the cause was probably ischemic heart failures. His coffin lay in state in St. Barnabas's. Hundreds lined the streets for the procession to his funeral, which took the form of a choral requiem Eucharist. Canon Henry Liddon wrote to Mr. Gladstone with a request that his body be interred in the wall of the church. Mr. Combes' merits and services have been so altogether exceptional that I make bold to ask you to speak to the Home Secretary in favour of the application. He explained that it was his widow's wish. The Prime Minister then forwarded the letter to Mr. Bruce, the Home Secretary. I ventured and hope the law may permit and your disposition lead you to allow this interment. The Home Secretary, however, decided against it. So crowds again watched the funeral procession as the funeral procession went to St. Sepulchre's Cemetery for his burial. Jackson's Oxford Journal stated that his death will be deeply deplored, not only by his own intimate friends, but also by his employees and the poorer inhabitants of the north of Oxford, to whom he was a kind friend and a generous benefactor. St. Barnabas's was a formative influence on the poet and hymn writer Henry Carey Shuttleworth, 1850 to 1900, who later became Professor of Pastoral Theology at King's College, London, and a minor canon of St. Paul's Cathedral. After 8 years as a schoolboy at Forest School, he won the Dyke Scholarship in January 1869 and entered St. Mary's Hall, where a contemporary described him as a most devoted churchman of the ritualistic school. He had much to offer the new church, both as a gifted musician and a young man with enthusiasm for pastoral ministry to the boys of the parish. These gifts were certainly not lost on the vicar, to whom he proved himself to be very useful, in the words of Noel, proved himself to be very useful, and while still a layman helped the Sunday school, which was started before we had a day school. And he was always ready to help the men and boys in any way he could in his spare time, being always thoroughly to be relied on for anything, and for the good tone of the set. And the good tone, he said. Father Noel invited Shuttleworth to live with him and the other clergy in the clergy house on the vicarage in 1872. Shuttleworth was ordained deacon in Advent 1873 and priest a year later, energetically serving as Father Noel's curate until he went to St. Paul's Cathedral in November 1876. There were also daily offices and Eucharists, and the church immediately became known for its advanced ritualism, exceeding that of almost any other Anglican churches in Oxford. In fact, all. Writing in 1892 on the religious life of Oxford, G.W. Gent observed that St. Barnabas was certainly the most conspicuous of the high churches, both from the grandeur of its ceremonies and from the number of undergraduates who attended its services. George W. E. Russell came up to Oxford from Harrow in October 1872, and on his second Sunday as a fresher at Christ Church, found my way to St. Barnabas, being led thither by a Harrow friend, one Charles Gore, scholar of Balliol. Gore's biographer mentioned that the two of them used to take walks together in term and vacation, visited the Cowley Fathers and the Church of St. Barnabas, attending Liddon's sermons. Church was keeping its dedication festival. The service was solemn evensong. which he found the most inspiring and uplifting worship I had ever joined. My impressions of it are as clear as yesterday's. The unadorned simplicity of the fabric, emphasizing by contrast the blaze of light and color around the altar, the floating cloud of incense, the expressive and unfussy ceremonial, the straightforward preaching, and most impressive of all, the large congregation of men, old and young, rich and poor, undergraduates and artisans, all singing evangelical hymns with one heart and voice. It was as if ever there was on earth congregational worship, and I, for one, have never seen its like. The clergy and worshippers were a family, and the church was a home. Many years later, Bishop Gore exclaimed from the pulpit that he loved St. Barnabas's. Preaching there in 1912, shortly after becoming Bishop of Oxford, Gore informed the congregation that after his ordination as a priest, he had celebrated his first Eucharist at St. Barnabas's. The diarist and rural clergyman, Francis Kilvert, attended Evensong on Ascension Day, 1876, and described the experience very unfavorably in his diary. The church was full. The clergy and choir entered with a procession, incense bearers and a great gilt cross. The thoroughfares and acolytes being in short white surplices over scarlet cassocks, and the last priest in the procession wearing a biretta and the chasuble stiff with gold. Kilvert was unimpressed by the sermon and described what happened during the Magnificat as pure Mariolatry. The final procession around the church also included 3 banners waving and moving above the heads of the people in a weird, strange, ghostly march. The poor Roman church hard by is quite plain and low church in its ritual compared with St. Barnabas in its festival dress on high days and holidays. In 1876, the only other church in Oxford where both vestments were worn and also there were candles on the altar was St. Thomas's. This can be compared with Charles Mackeson's figures in his guide to the churches of London and the suburbs. By 1879, there were still, according to Mackeson, only 33 churches out of 868 in London where vestments were worn, and 43 with candles on their altars. Even more significantly, there were only 13 in which incense was used. All 3 had been in use at St. Barnabas's from the beginning. The same person who recalled the consecration to Russell described the ritual as more ornate than anything before seen in Oxford. Eucharistic vestments, silk and colored, being used as well as lighted candles and even incense. However, St. Barnabas's was not directly affected by the prosecutions under the Public Worship Regulations Act of 1874, designed to put down ritualism in the Church of England. Wilberforce's successor as Bishop of Oxford, John Macanus, dismissed complaints against Noel and lauded him as a brother who is devoting his energies, his time and his money to the welfare, as he believes, of his flock. However, the church suffered from the proselytizing campaign of one of his former curates who had become a Roman Catholic. A contemporary cartoon portrayed it as Barnabas Junction, with Cardinals Newman and Manning waiting for others to change here for Rome. Another cartoon, that Newman wasn't a cardinal at this point, another cartoon portrayed Newman welcoming those crossing the Bridge of Sighs. Steadfastly, Montague Henry Noel remains a stalwart apologist for the Catholic faith within the established church. In 1872, he stated plainly in the Sermon on Confession that he had labored for peace. I tried to teach the Catholic faith in its fullness, as I always hope to do, as long as God gives me breath. As a fine preacher, many of his sermons were published not long ago now. Drawing undergraduates during term time, the church was often packed for high mass on Sundays. Father Noel, like his two immediate successors, was a gifted musician, and the rich liturgy of the Book of Common Prayer was complemented by a fine choir and a succession of excellent organists. Father Noel was keen to include the children in the worship and life of the church and began children's services. St. Paul's School for Boys had been built by George Edmund Street as diocesan architect in 1855-6 and was transferred to St. Barnabas's. Father Noel paid £700 for a new school in Jackson Street to be built for St. Paul's. St. Barnabas's Girls and Infant School was built in 1872. These schools remained church property under the Education Act of 1870, so the buildings were maintained as two parishes. Two charitable ladies defrayed the cost for the Parochial Institute, which was founded in 1891. It provided what the last vicar, Father Jonathan Beswick, described as 3 decent-sized communal rooms and residential accommodation for an assistant priest and caretaker. One downstairs room was originally the reading room and another the billiard room. A very short epilogue. The advowson remained in Thomas Coomb's hands until his death in 1872, and then passed to the Bishop of Oxford. In 1886, it passed to Keble College in exchange for St. Martin's. When Noel left in November 1899, the warden of Keble College approached the Reverend C.H. Bickerton Hudson, who had already been a curate to Father Noel for 19 years. His poor health made it a very difficult task, even with the assistance of an able curate. After 2 years, he resigned the living, which then passed to Cyril Hallett. The new incumbent ended Noel's class for chaps, which had been held in the vicarage since before the children's services. Father Hallett also made changes in liturgical usage and was especially involved in church music. Dom Anselm Hughes described St. Barnabas's under Hallett as baroque in its furnishings and still more in its music, which was of the Gounod type. Last page. The painted glass murals of the Te Deum were added to the north wall between 1905 and 1911 in a technique known as Opus Sectine. Hallett joined the university's mission to Central Africa in 1911, becoming Archdeacon of Zanzibar. We move rapidly forward at the very end. In 2010, Father Jonathan wrote, St. Barnabas was built as a place that would draw people to God in worship and to help them know his love in the way they were treated. Goals that are no less noble today than they were 141 years ago. I took this final photograph at the Mass to celebrate the church's sesquicentenary in October 2019. Thomas Coomb's most ritualistic church is still going strong, 152 years after its consecration. Thank you all for listening, and I'm sorry it's been so long.
Thank you so much, Michael.
For those that remain.
I'm going to
Thank
switch
you,
my
Michael.
view to gallery. Thank you so much.
I rushed it rather because it was rather long.
I don't know Oxford particularly well. I've only been a couple of times, so it's my wife enjoys Morse and Lewis, so that's
the reason. So. That's the reason for being here.
Yeah, that's it. You know,
that's very honest, Trevor. It's appreciated.
I now have to take her. You're the one who put Morse at the beginning. So that's fascinating.
Indeed.
Yeah, I really didn't know about those parts of Oxford. So it's nice to have some sort of fresh things on it. Yeah.
For those who aren't normally here, there's a discussion usually afterwards, any questions, comments, which probably will not be too long, I expect. There we go. I think there are plenty of Lisa, did you pick up the chat, or did somebody pick up the chat?
I did.
Comments?
Yeah, I've got it. I've got it. I'll
I
get
couldn't
it
get
to
through
you.
it. Are any
That's all right.
questions in there?
I'll get it to you later. There weren't any questions yet, just lots of praise.
Oh, well, I shall read that.
Yes, I'll get the whole thing to you.
Thank you.
I was going to say thank you, Michael, because I also worked for OUP for many years, and it was interesting to see those photographs. And one of the buildings I worked in was a pub for the employees, and it still has the dumb waiter inside it. And I always enjoyed working in the library at OUP and seeing Martin. So Martin does a fantastic job at OUP. He was a huge asset to the organisation.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Thomas Hardy's relative. Thank you, Hattie. I have to get that in.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Fiona, by all means, of course.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, due to a phone call, I've rather sort of dipped in and out.
Oh, sorry, that's Margaret. I beg your pardon.
Hi. I wonder if you could say something about the formation of women's monastic orders in the 19th century.
Oh, good heavens. And I think not a lot, actually. I saw there are other people who know more about it.
I mean,
I think that you and I met at All Saints Margaret Street, which I think was the first ever women's religious order, which was there, I think, as early as 1845. But I'm not sure. I mean, it's not a subject I know a great deal about, to be honest. So
was there any connection with St. Barnabas and religious order?
No, none right. At all. I'm aware. Yeah. With any of the convents and we have a couple of Franciscans, or at least one in the choir at the moment. I think Margaret, if Maggie's still here, she'll verify that, but I think so. But at the time, as far as I'm aware, there was no connection. Does anybody else I know an answer to that? I don't know whether Jeremy or David or anyone here knows the answers to that.
Right, not Michael.
No.
Vera has a hand raised.
Vera, yes.
Good evening. Can I ask one question? In fact, with my colleague, we were working on the liturgical set from Russia, which is in the church. Do you have some documents, archival documents maybe, concerning its arrival to Oxford, to the church of St. Barnabas? Sorry,
which liturgical?
St. Barnabas Church.
What? The only things I know of at St. Barnabas, and I don't know whether you and Nina, but I showed her these last Sunday, are the vestments that, well, I mean, they were worn last Sunday, they were in that last photograph. The golden vestments, which it is reputed were worn at the coronation of Tsar Nikolai II, and then, of course, adapted to Western usage at a later point. The chalice, Maggie's not here anymore, is she? Because she knows more about these things than I do, expect. The chalice.
Chalice and two plates.
The chalice that was given by Tsar Alexander III is very occasionally used, but is actually stored in safekeeping at Christchurch.
Yes, I know.
That much I do know. In terms of any other liturgical connections with Russia, there is a Russian icon, an old Russian icon in the Lady Chapel, which is still lit, but I'm not sure of any other connections with Russia.
Sorry, but how do you know that it was given by the Tsar? There is some documentation
Well,
about it,
I
because it's
personally, I don't. Christchurch maintains this, I think.
yes, I know, because I
Nina
saw
may
it
have
and
made some more research on this than me, probably, if she's here.
Mhm.
But I don't know for certain about that. All I can say is that it is that's what has been passed down, and it's assumed that it is. And the relic, a copy of that, which I think
Yes, I
is
know.
kept at St Barnabas, but the original is at Christchurch.
Christchurch, yes,
So
I
how
saw
it came to an Anglican church from the Tsar, I am not at all sure. It
yes.
seems a little strange, particularly for Alexander III, but yeah.
But there is some legend that it was the Tsar who had given to the
Yes,
church or
that's
to
the
somebody.
legend. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
I can't
Very
tell you any more
interesting.
than that, Vera, I'm afraid.
Very interesting. Thank you. We are working now on the article about it also.
Ah,
That's
okay.
why
Well, I
I
think
must.
if you know Nina, I think
Kruglikova, I think.
she's wanted to do some research on this. I showed her the vestment last Sunday in the sacristy because they were worn for the dedication. She missed the sacrament last time. Pleasure, Ludmilla. Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm intrigued by Evangelische Kirchengemeinde. Whoever that is down there. Lutheran. Yeah.
I think Crispin asked a question in the chat.
Crispin or Chris? Crispin?
Do you want me?
Yes. Hello, Michael. Yes, I.
Yes, Crispin. Do please show yourself if you can.
Yes, indeed. Let me just put the video on as well. Hold on. There we try. Let's try again.
Don't worry if you can't, but it'd be nice to see you again.
Yes, there we are. I'm in the dark a bit here, Michael. The lighting. I'm in the subdued lighting.
I'm curious by the painting at the behind you, but never mind, Crispin.
Yes, the laughing lady. Yes, is on my paternal side. But
okay.
Returning to your wonderful talk, and thank you very much indeed for the
Crispin. Thank you for joining us.
No, it was really enlightening. What I'd like to ask, you mentioned about the campanile, and I would like to ask, was it part of Bloomfield's original design, and in particular, was it modelled on a specific church? You referenced
it was modelled on Torcello. It was more.
It is modelled on Torcello, is it?
As far as the main body of the church was concerned, that's was modelled on the Schola Cantorum, certainly on San Clemente. Who's that? If any Orthodox here will know, I'm talking about. I can't remember his name. Architectural historian who's Orthodox now, who said it was definitely had links with the Ravenna in terms of its style, but in terms of the Nicholas, oh gosh, no, gone. He's gone now. Anyway, it certainly wasn't on Torcello, as I tried to show from the photograph.
Yes.
It was separate from the church as a whole, but it was certainly designed to be separate. But the problem, as far as the problem, and the organist, unfortunately, the choirmaster and organist, who couldn't obviously turn up today, has done a lot of research about the early history of the choir. He just doesn't need. That the problem was that it was separate, and the choir would come out of the campanile, across the mud into the church itself. So it was deemed rather good idea if the choir were robing in the campanile, which was rather an odd place to do it at that point when they were, that they should be linked together, which they were by 3 years later. I believe that's the story behind it.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you very much.
The clock tower, as I said, the clock was added later, of course. Yeah. But do you know Torcello? Has anyone been to Torcello here?
Yes, I've been. I've had the good fortune to go 3 times, and it's it's a beautiful basilica. And it has a wonderful west end as well as an east end. Actually, it's a very fine church.
Oh, well, then you probably, because you've been to St. Barnabas, certainly with us once.
Yeah.
I was received back into the Church of England at St. Barnabas from the Orthodox Church, and you were there.
Yes, I was. Yes, I do. Very well. Yes.
You very kindly came.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So.
Alban has a question as well.
Sorry?
Alban has a question.
Can I ask you something, Michael?
Yes, I can't guarantee you to answer all these questions, but we'll do our best.
I'm sure you know a lot about anything. First of all, thanks for the talk. I was very excited to see Arthur Blomfield there, and I've just on my recent journey back from my football tour, I came back and stopped at Tintersfield in near Bristol,
yes,
which is another Arthur Blomfield church.
It is. Yeah.
Which couldn't be consecrated because it had a low church vicar in control of it. Or could only be consecrated for the family, which I thought was very interesting. So I was thrilled to see it. Even more thrilled to see the relative of Florence Dugdale, but that's beside the by. I was going to ask you about the 1874 Act to challenge ritualism.
Sure.
Was anybody actually prosecuted under it? Because it obviously
yes,
didn't work, did it?
Father Arthur Tooth is the famous one. Behind bars. Off the top of my head, I can't remember who the other four were. I can look them up, but I can't remember.
Prosecuted
there were three immediate prosecutions fairly immediately, yes. But the act fell into disuse. Gladstone, of course, opposed it altogether for obvious reasons, and then he became Prime Minister, so that sort of put that into, basically it fell into disrepute because of the imprisonments of these recalcitrant priests, made them martyrs of Anglican Catholicism. Therefore, it was the last thing that the act was designed to do. And I think some archbishops were reluctant. There's a famous story, I think, anybody knows St. Albans High Holborn here, presumably one or two people do, of Archbishop Tate. Charlotte was there, pleasure. Archbishop Tate, who was then Bishop of London and apparently sort of broadly speaking an evangelical. And Archstephen, nice to see you, Stephen. Yeah, and apparently there's this famous story, I forget who, Dean Church had been down to St. Albans and Tate met him on one occasion. And he said, where have you been, Dean? He said, I've been to St. Albans, where you will see three men in green. You will find it awfully hard to put them down. In green vestments, obviously. It was a tricky one. I think some of the bishops were a little found it rather difficult to prosecute. John McHarness wrote to Noel telling him to please stop all these vestments and everything, stop it, but he didn't force him to do it.
You'd think it might drive more people to Rome then, rather than prevent ritualism.
But of course, quite a lot of early Tractarians did follow the Newman Road and become Roman Catholic. There was a priest actually at St. Barnabas recently who became a Roman Catholic. And I think he said he was he felt that it was a bit of he didn't feel it's the real thing. A lot, and of course, there's been a road that direction also ever since. Graham Leonard and all sorts of people ever since. The ordination women, quite a few have gone over. So, it's still a fairly open road in that direction. Very few in the opposite, as far as I'm aware.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, any points or questions? Anything in the chat? Anybody can see it?
A little random, but what was the name of that tall lady in a black suit on the picture from 2009 of 2019? I remember her.
Which tall lady? I'll have to go back to the picture.
She goes to St. Barnabas and she does some like she's that lady in a black suit with.
You mean there? Oh, Hanukkah, who's the Wilson, who's the one of the church wardens.
Oh, I see. Well, I hope she's doing all right.
They're both holding the you know, their whatever the word is. They're somebody give me the correct term for that, Jeremy. What's that thing? It's a church.
It's a wand. It's
a wand. Thank you, Father. Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. They're wands. Yeah, okay. That was a cute Roseword. So that may answer your question on that. But you can see in that photograph, if you can see the photograph, the gold vestments that I was referring to, which were reputed to be worn for the coronation of the last Tsar.
Yes, I remember those.
Yeah, you've probably seen them when you came with us, so to speak. Yeah. It's and unfortunately, you know, some people have already left us, including our choir master now is the one with the baby in the back, and he's about to leave. That's I'm afraid one of the poor girls in the choristers, when I tried to put the picture straight, and you found half of her's gone, but there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Michael or comments?
Or comments, please.
Right. I was just glad to see the inside of the church because I walked right past it and meant to come back and didn't.
Well,
so thank you.
Still be there the next time you come to Oxford. Bill has been there. Patty, I don't know whether Patty is still. Yeah. Patty, right?
I was there with.
You were there
doing. A few times, and yeah, I learned a great deal from your lecture, so I really appreciate it. It has a wonderful history, and it's a wonderful church.
Thank you. Good to have you with us.
Anyone else? Yes, David.
Michael.
David.
Thanks.
Another priest in Mufti. Yep.
I well remember attending worship there with you and Patty a few years ago when I stayed with you. And
yes.
I have vivid memories of the service personally and meeting others as well. And found that one of my former tutors had attended as well, and that he rushed off at the end. So I rushed after him, caught up with him, and we had a brief catch up. What strikes me, as I put in a comment, that a leading Anglican evangelical bishop has left and gone to Rome, you know, parallels between our day and the eventful.
Oh yes, of course he has. Yeah.
There's a lot of all this flowing out from the Church of England then, and people moving up through the gears of churchmanship quite rapidly, really, from the churches of their nurture into presumably a destination, a home, and it is. I mean, it's good that it's possible nowadays without all the heartache and the abuse.
Yes.
But I have to say I'm one of those who's glad to be Anglican and also to appreciate so much of the Catholic tradition.
And the Orthodox, in your case, of course, as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think my main hesitation, apart from doctrinal reasons, my main objection to joining the Church of Rome is what you leave behind, and in the world fellowship of the Christian faith, which is represented by, you know, prayer book Anglicans, and Calvinists, and charismatics over here, and the breadth and beauty and richness of the Eastern tradition, so this objection of mine to joining Rome is leaving the others behind, as it were.
Yeah.
That dear old
can
belong to everything.
I must say I had a sense of leaving the others behind when I briefly became Orthodox, and which didn't last, as most of you know, but at the time it was very traumatic. I wrote quite a lot about it at the time, this sense of leaving. So, yeah. Well, thank you, Father Jeremy. Thank you, Jeremy, for joining us tonight, my rector. Yeah. There was also Provost of Fundy. Yeah. Marina, yes, please. Talking about the Orthodox. Marina.
I don't have any questions, but I want to thank you. This was quite informative, very interesting lecture with lots of pictures. I need it very much. Thank you.
Patty, can you take that? Patty, can you take that? Oh, just let me turn that phone off. I don't know really. It's probably a nonsense. Just one moment. Don't go away, everyone.
Marina, have you colored your hair? I really like it. Yeah. I really like it. Sorry.
Dana, please.
Nothing. Nothing.
We were having a deep discussion, then you changed the subject. Marina. Thank you, Dana. Marina. No, you've been to St. Barnabas, although to a lecture, but not to worship there, but you've seen it, of course.
I've been, yes.
And as an Orthodox, I just want, my question is, I think, more about, I think I'd like to ask those Orthodox who are still here, the Russians and the Ukrainians getting a bit late, so let me just ask whoever's still here, this, the Basilica, the whole model of the early, Thomas Coomer's early Christian, this kind of tradition, this Basilica shape, the Pantocrator and the apse and all of this, was there something which rung true to you in the sense of seemed familiar about that?
Familiar about what?
The art, particularly the art over the altar of the. I know you have a hypostasis in the way, but this whole the whole design of the church was supposed to be Byzantine. Therefore, well, Greek Orthodox probably more in terms of its original influence. And I just wonder how an Orthodox feels about somewhere like St. Barnabas architecturally.
Well, as for me, it's completely different from the Orthodox churches, but I was wanted to see the icons on the walls. So Yes,
The
I
icons, there are icons
this.
in the on the west end because the Melkite Catholics celebrate the Divine Liturgy there once a month. And that's an Eastern Catholic, Byzantine Catholic liturgy there. But of course, there's an icon. The only other icons there are one, the Lady Chapel, and the icon of small one of St. Barnabas. I must say, with Anglican churches are increasingly beginning to use icons, at least having them on the walls. I noticed a familiar one. I found, fortunately, Jeremy's left, Woodstock Church. Very familiar one as icon of St. Nicholas on the work, you know, your patient, and so on. So, yeah. But I think just one final point coming back from what David was saying, and that is this, that in the mid-19th century, leaving the Church of England, particularly for Rome, to become a Roman Catholic, was an incredibly traumatic move. If you think of the friendship between Newman, Keble, and Pusey, you know, it was split aside for several years by Newman leaving for Rome, and I don't think, not even sure Pusey ever met him again after that. Either of them, for that matter, actually met Newman in person again. You know, if you hoped, I remember even in my mother having a cousin, my father's cousin. I remember Agnes, born in 1881, and she went over to Rome, and the family virtually didn't speak to her after that. Yeah, it was a much bigger thing in those days. Fortunately, these days you can go where your conscience leads you, but in those days it was a lot more difficult. And of course, as a church like St. Barnabas, the problem in the 1870s was there was a strong proselytizing campaign by one of the curates and to bring people over to Rome, and several did leave, and several curates left. So it was, yeah, it was difficult. Anyway, thank you, everyone. Thank you to all for coming, and thank you for the dwindling few that have stayed on. I much appreciate it very much.
Thank you to everyone, and I'll have the video up soon.
Yeah, we'll have for those of you who aren't here regulars, a video recording of all our talks. Lisa is responsible. Perhaps, Lisa, you could put the link to the website on there.
Oh, I had done that,
so
but
for those who are not,
it's been covered up by more.
A YouTube channel.
Yes.
And Lisa puts all the recordings up, so they're readily
it's in the chat.
available if you miss anything. There you are. Thank you very much.
It also has the program for future talks through December as well. So thank you everyone for coming, and thank you so much.
Join
Michael.
us again. And thank you again. Lovely to see you all.
And thank you, Michael.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.